Peace to the family. This is the Hermistic representing www.hermistic.com. Be sure to utilize the links in the description and check the article out for this video that we're having here. Today we're talking about the archetype of Virgo and the Hermit. Most people don't really study archetypes. Most people think they're just out here doing it by themselves. But when you study archetypes, you'll realize that within the human body, there are actually power centers or glands or understandings about the human body that actually grow you into self-realization. And a lot of people deal with the external world and what they can get out of the external world, but a lot of people do not deal with the internal world. So this conversation is centered on the internal world. In this conversation, we'll be talking about Virgo, we'll be talking about the Hermit, we'll be talking about the Virgo and Hermit archetype, as well as the spleen and our higher consciousness and how this all relates. So give me a second as we kind of go through this. But like I said earlier, if you want to read through this, be sure to click the links in the description. The constellation Virgo is Latin for virgin. It is the 6th astrological sign. Virgo has a fixed earth mode of expression. So what that means is it's mutable, it's changeable, but it's actually earth. And earth relates to the physical world, but more importantly, the physical world as we understand it is just simply the human body. So another word for this process is constant change, and constant change is another word for alchemy. Virgo is ruled by Mercury, which represents alchemy, because if you understand Mercury as an element, it extracts gold from rock. When Mercury comes into contact with gold, the gold dissolves into the mercury, and when the two is separated, the mercury can be distilled off and all that's left is gold. And so this is the process of psychological alchemy in just the real sense of how they can transfer the element Mercury to the planet Mercury and then ultimately to human psychological processes. So if you want to check out psychological alchemy, I did a whole series on that. The link to that will be in the descriptions. Like I said, Virgo is an earth sign, and this is denoted as being melancholic. And melancholic in old medicine is defined as black bile. Black bile is a mental depression. In old medicine, they imagined that there was black bile that was secreted from the spleen, and it would have you sad or disorientated, just not with it. One had to understand that Virgo governs the abdomen, including the spleen, all of the organs, the belly, the bowels, the small intestine. So this is the human body. And if you understand the spleen, which we'll talk about a little later, it is our ability to purify ourselves of this melancholy, of these negative energies. So understanding when they say Virgo is the sign of purity, is not like a moral purity. It's an actual physical purity that the spleen takes care of. So that's why Virgo rules over the spleen. It's a symbol of the human body. The Hermit is associated with Virgo as well, and this is closely related to the body, health, personal development. Mercury rules Virgo. Here we have another form of alchemy, and we have another understanding of the creativity and maturity that happens within the human body. And this is showing us our ability to be more than just one thing. We have earth, we have air, and that's why in mythology, Mercury is the mediator between the living and the dead, because he is seen as an air sign, but he's also seen as an earth sign. And this is just another understanding of Mercury as an element, because it's known as quicksilver. It could be a metal and it could also be liquid. So it's just the malleability of the human mind and the human body. So the symbol for the Hermit, the symbol for Virgo and how it connects is through the Hebrew letter Yod. Yod represents the building blocks to creation. And if we understand the building blocks to creation is representative of higher consciousness. So what do I mean? A sperm is a symbol of Yod. Now, we can't tell our sperm, hey, we want you to make this baby, and we want it to be like this, like that, like that, like this. No, it does it automatically. So when they use sperm as a symbol, it represents God in a sense, and how we are God within ourselves, because we have the ability to have children, but we don't actually know how that works. Okay, we might understand how it works, but we can't manipulate the process. We just kind of have to do what we need to do and then let nature take its course. So the actual modality of nature taking its course is the is encapsulated in the symbol of the Yod, the Hermit, or Virgo. Let's deal with the spleen.
Magic window.
What is this? What's
Don't
going
worry
on?
about it. Check this out. The spleen's that soft purple organ located right behind the stomach and under the lungs. It's about 5 inches wide and weighs about 6 ounces.
Now here's a fun fact that'll impress your friends. You can actually live without your spleen. Why? Because your other organs would step up.
Really? Then why am I lugging this stupid spleen around if I don't need it?
Well, it's definitely better to have one because it stores blood and helps fight serious infections. But its main job is to act like a filter for your blood. Healthy blood cells flow through the spleen, no problem, bada bing, bada boom. But the damaged and dead cells get caught in a series of narrow passageways and then get broken down.
So essentially, the spleen's kind of like a badass bouncer for your blood.
Yeah, it kind of is. And it also filters out bacteria and viruses, creating white blood cells to help fight infection.
So a spleen cleans up your blood, produces the essentials to battle infection, and keeps some blood in storage for you.
Congratulations, you're now a certified spleenologist.
So like I said earlier, Mercury can represent the afterlife when it's in the earth, but that's just another symbol for the spleen because the spleen is where the red blood cells come to rest. And so to put it differently, we plant seeds in the earth, right? We bury our dead in the earth. So in other words, the spleen is that in the body. It's like the body's graveyard, but it redistributes the nutrients as such. So the spleen is really related to our overall mental health, spiritual health, and physical health. So it's a very important thing, but a lot of people don't really talk about it. So the spleen is closely related to the center of man, which is the Yod, which is the hand of God, which is the foundation of all other letters in the Hebrew combination. So all Hebrew letters have a form or instance of the Yod, just in different ways. So the Yod is the building blocks to language. Understand that the word is God. That's one of the major things, but understanding how to formulate your words in different spells and incantations could really make or break your magic. But we just tend to not understand that process. So in deeply understanding this process, you got to tap into a level of wisdom and discernment. Within us, we have the spleen that's already doing it, so we can tap into that wisdom and we can relate it into our external world. The purity that represents the Virgo archetype is wisdom of the body. So in other words, like I said earlier, the sperm is not controlled by man's mind. The sperm has a mind of its own. And because it has a mind of its own, life can continue. So therefore, encapsulates the inner wisdom of this archetype that we can tap into our human body to understand that we're much smarter than we give ourselves credit to. In basic terms, the hermit is sperm and male fertility, but it needs the goddess of Virgo to manifest. Sperm within itself is just nothing. It's a seed, but when you plant it into the goddess, it grows into something. And now this could be a baby, this could be ideas, businesses, so forth and so on. How we connect this to the spleen transports the nutrients required for sperm production. So in other words, this archetype once again represents the hidden wisdom and discernment within. Our body has a way of making decisions for us, and we don't realize it. We think we're in control, but in understanding astrology, understanding this hidden wisdom is more of the wisdom of the body that all of us can tap into to really help us with our external world. But the problem is we're focused on the external world and disregarding the inner world because it's so advanced. Sperm, fertility, the spleen, intestines are a result of our unconscious process that are vital to living a healthy, happy life. No more melancholy, ladies and gentlemen. To finish up, the spleen governs the transportation and transformation of what we consume into energy that builds and protects the blood. This is alchemy. Whatever we eat has to be broken down and transferred into energy. So be mindful of what you eat. And that connects to the previous lesson that we was talking about in Cancer, the digestive tract, and then combining it with the spleen. Then we understand, like, man, what I eat is really important to my overall spiritual development, because it gets into a point of knowing how to purify the blood. And that's what the spleen does. So why is it important to purify the blood? Because the blood holds our entire consciousness. It holds our entire blueprint to our past lives, ancestors, so forth and so on. So if we're just unmindful of our blood flow and unmindful of our inner dialogue, then we have passed crazy at this point. It's time to purify your blood and get in contact with yourself. Google how to purify your blood, what supplements, what are the things to do to purify your blood if you feeling a little off. You might look at the external world like being a problem, but the gist of these conversations is that it's not the external world. It is your internal world that need to be adjusted. And the realization comes from the earth element. And the earth element is connected to the archetypal figure of the mother. And the mother is our first sense of nourishment, our first source of nourishment. Before we was conscious, before we thought we was, magic, magicians, witches, and all of these particular things, we were inundated by the earth element, and that figure is our mother. So the love of the mother instills in us the ability to care for or mother ourselves. So within us, we have a motherly energy that cares for us, and we can't necessarily care for it, but we can by being aware and doing things. So the spleen represents that earth element within us. Earth is associated with harvest time. So the promise of harvest is the culmination of all. What we had was once a seed has now come into fruition. And that's where you get the wheat from that is symbolized with Virgo, because that wheat is the actual growth from that seed. Okay, when we speak of treating the spirit, we must remember that the spirit itself is pure consciousness, is indivisible, it cannot be compromised or corrupted. Composed of nothing but itself, it has no parts to treat, to balance or imbalance. However, our perception of spirit can indeed be compromised. So when you look inside of yourself and you're alive, you're kicking, you're moving, you look inside yourself, you see a perfect system. When you look outside of yourself, you see an imperfect system. So that imperfect system could really throw off your perception of your perfection. But when you are in a meditative mode, you're looking within, balancing yourself out, activating your glands, mastering your hormones, then your external world will change. But if you're trying to change the outside without changing the inside, your external world will change, but you will not appreciate it because you're bringing yourself with you. Okay, and if you understand about yourself, it has to be a matter of perception. To conclude, we cannot treat the spirit, we must treat our perception of the spirit, and this requires the purification that the spleen provides. So tapping into this inner wisdom is all you need to do. People always ask, well, how do I do this? How do I raise the kundalini? Can you tell me about this? Can you tell me about that? Yes and no. And the most that I'm gonna tell you is to how to get in tune with yourself. Besides that, y'all have a great day, great evening, great wherever time you find this video. I'm the Hood Mystic, representing hoodmystic.com. Peace and love. Shout out to all the Virgos out there too. 1.